Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. I am Joyo19 and today I'm going to be speaking about the state of the American economy, the economic policy of President Biden, and how it will impact the 2024 presidential election. As it currently stands, the economy has improved significantly since 2022, and as a result, the Democratic Party has touted a new economic policy known as Bidenomics, which seeks to capitalize on the economic fortitude and outline how they have said to be improving the economy. I have stated in the past that Joe Biden has a record of liberal economic policy, big government, big taxes to an extent, and also supportive of labor unions. Those measures are pretty standard in the Democratic Party. But one thing that has also been a policy of Biden in this case is infrastructure investment as a means to incentivize construction jobs while also providing high-paying wages. We're going to go through what Joe Biden is saying that he's doing and why it might be a key factor into the 2024 election. So he announced Bidenomics just 2 months ago in June. He said that it was about growing the economy from the middle out and bottom up. Now, what does that mean? He says it's not from the top down. Basically, what he's saying there is you're saying the lower class and for middle class families to be the perpetuators of that growth. The idea that the minimum wage, for example, should be raised is a key policy of Biden. In fact, it was just I think last month that a few key officials and notable members of the party tweeted out saying that the minimum wage has not been raised on this date for 14 years. I believe it's $7.25 as it currently stands. And as a result, workers are struggling in times of significant inflation and economic stress. Now, in contrast, there is a concern that raising the minimum wage so hastily will also raise inflation, but studies have been done to show that that may not have a significant impact. And inflation is more so impacted by supply-side economics as well as the actual supply of shipping resources, goods and services, and getting them into the country. And as long as the Ukraine war is on and other economic factors such as the onset of COVID-19 debt and economic implications of energy prices and such, then that is going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to get those down. So stimulus checks and welfare is a big part, the Democrats say, of hindering that. And it's fairly popular these days. It's not unpopular in the American demographic to say that people should be given welfare. One interesting political sort of philosophy that's going on at the moment is that the Republicans are currently running on a campaign saying that the Democrats want to destroy Social Security. They want to destroy Social Security, and that's a very interesting argument, isn't it, considering that it was FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a prominent liberal Democrat in regards to the economy, who instituted that. But the reason that the Republicans are touting that is because there are several Democrats who have stated that they would like to reform or replace Social Security with something more hands-on and something more forceful. The most notable example of that is, of course, the universal basic income. Bernie Sanders and a number of other officials and prominent legislators have supported it, or the idea of it at least. That itself is it's not exactly standard in the demographic. In fact, even in Europe, it's unpopular. So that is not going to be, I don't think, a piece of policy for at least another 2 decades. But I will say that that kind of rhetoric and that kind of tactic as a means for political view has actually shifted the minds of a lot of voters. It's seen as something that the Democrats could do, and as such, people like Kevin McCarthy are really punching on it. Now let's talk about unemployment. So in regards to unemployment, it's a bit of a more complicated issue because the last decade of employment has been fairly strong. Under Obama, it reached a low level. Under Trump, it was incredibly low. And now under Biden, it is still low. In fact, it's the lowest since 1969, 3.6%. Now, one key piece of economic theoretical policy is something called structurally based unemployment. That's basically to say that there are two types of unemployment that cannot be eradicated no matter how much fiddling you do with the economy. So that 3.6, a vast majority of that are going to come from what's called structural unemployment. Those two types are structural unemployment and frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment is basically where if you are employed, if you have a job, if you're receiving an income for a task that you do and it's officially documented, then you are employed. But let's say that you switch jobs, you transition. For the period of time by which you are moving between those jobs, say it's an office job, you have to move your supplies, you're not going to be paid because you're not doing a job. And despite the fact that you know that you are going to be employed, you are technically not receiving an income and therefore you are unemployed. Nothing's happening to you. And that's called frictional unemployment. That is always going to exist. It's economically infeasible to get rid of that. The second type is called structural. It's a much more simple type of unemployment. That is whereby you cannot find a job because of because you have a specific skill set that is currently not in demand by the free market. That's the labor market. In that sense, you are unemployed, but you will be likely to find that later on. A good example of this is casual positions, or if you're an electrician, you can be unemployed if you are not currently working and you are not currently on a consistent income. That may be because people don't necessarily need an electrician at the moment. They may not need a construction worker at the moment. I'll give you an example. Currently, the rising cost of properties around the world, but especially down here in Australia, you'll find that construction companies are going out of business because there is no demand for people to buy and build new properties. So therefore, they aren't making an income and they shut down. That raises unemployment, and that also creates structural unemployment. And that's basically why you have an average of 3.6%. Now, because it seems quite high. I mean, how can there be 3.6% when there is such high demand for workers? The majority, or at least a fundamental portion of that employment, is going to be structural and frictional unemployment. And that's kind of a key policy with the Democrats, or at least Biden in this sense, is that most of the unemployment that still exists, the very little that there is economically regular. So how does that intertwine with the election? The election, of course, is just under 500 days away, and currently the Republican Party is looking for a nominee, and Biden's popularity is slowly rising. So what do? They create what's called Bidenomics. It outlines all of the key economic policies that I've just outlined and puts them into a kind of manifesto, or doctrine, you'd say. He put it into a doctrine to say that every economic strength that is currently coming out of America, it's been a result of the theoretical and practical economic policy that this administration has enforced, taking credit for it. Now, whether it's true or not, it's debatable. Frankly, the free market has much more power. It's much more power than a government ever will. But that is up to the American voters whether they think Biden has helped this or not. But how I will say it will affect the election is that voters will go in thinking there was a period of time whereby inflation was skyrocketing. If I go over to trading economics here, you can see that in July of last year, the inflation rate was 8.5. If I go to 5 years, look at this. In 2020, it decreased drastically as a result of COVID. 2021, it starts rising. And then right as Biden gets into office, it skyrockets, goes up like crazy. And then in July, it peaks. And now ever since then, it's going down. It's falling. And right when, around this area here, it fell to its lowest point in 2 years, that's when they announced Bidenomics. So that's why this is because voters will think, gee, inflation was at one point strong, but under this administration, under Bidenomics, it's now weak. And interest rates have a big part of that. That is the final part of curbing inflation in this sense, is getting to a point whereby consumer spending is curbed. That's called contractionary monetary policy. It's enforced by the Federal Reserve. And they do that in an attempt to bring prices down, lowering the prices without artificially instilling price caps and instead working with the free market. So this policy, the forecast currently is set to continue to lower inflation. It's happening all around the world. Every Federal Reserve is committing to high interest rates because you need to be able to stop the consumer spending and bring down inflation. And it's working. But the current forecast says that although with the United States the inflation is 3%, it is unlikely that the economy will get to a sense of normal until late 2025. That is on a global but also a domestic scale for the United States, because you still have other economic factors such as interest rates. Because of course, even if inflation decreases, you can't then just go lowering interest rates the minute it's gone, because the problem is still there. The Ukraine war is still going on. Economic policies are still strenuous. So you can't just say, let's lower the interest rates, because it will skyrocket again. So what you will see happen is over the next 2 years, inflation will sort of stagnate, probably get to a point where it was maybe around 2020, maybe this time next year, maybe in a few months. But what you will definitely see is interest rates sticking high. Currently in the United States, the interest rates are at a 22-year high, the highest they've ever been. They were risen just a few days ago. And that is putting a lot of stress on middle-class workers and lower-class workers and lower-class families. So that is the current situation. So with all of that taken into account, how will it affect 2024? Again, I've got all the regular swing states on here, and I'm going to see what it will do. So first of all, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Michigan are Democratic. I'm cloaking those off immediately because Pennsylvania has had a massive infrastructure investment into it, and also the blue wave. Michigan, same thing. New Hampshire, still think it's going to lean Democratic. Minnesota, same thing. And then we are down to these 5. I've seen a lot of metrics saying that there are numbers in Nevada that might suggest a Republican flip, sort of no matter what in 2024, to an extent no matter which candidate, because after the 2022 midterms and the gains that Republicans made in that state, it's seen as now a comfortable Republican state. This is different from the 2024 summarization I did last month. This is new numbers. With that said, though, I'm still under the impression that it's going to go Democratic, because I think, especially if the nominee is Trump, that there is still a key voter bloc there that will be loyal to the Democratic Party. And I'm going to flip through these here and say that Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia, if it's Trump v. Biden, which I think it will be, as I stated in the 2024 summarization video, all of these states will be won. It'll be largely the same as the previous election. But under the impression that the economic forecast is correct and that Trump is the nominee, inflation is decreased, interest rates are slightly decreased, I think North Carolina can be won by the Democrats. And I think in this case, it will be. Because if Bidenomics holds up, if Bidenomics stands true to its goals, and if it is successful, then I think the labor unions and the labor caucuses in North Carolina will be very impressed. And I think there's going to be even more significant infrastructural investment into that state. But it would be the most marginal out of any state, I think, here, maybe with the exception of Georgia and Arizona. But with that said, that is my video covering Bidenomics and the August prediction for a Trump v. Biden matchup. I am currently under the impression that the Democrats are in a good position, despite the budget deficit and despite the current credit rating loss, which I may do another video talking about. That's a different policy. That's fiscal policy. But thank you all for watching, and please leave a comment below if you disagree with this video, or if you have anything to let me know, if you have any suggestions or feedback, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.